The call dropped just as I turned into his parents' driveway. I remember staring at the screen for a second. 3 bars one moment, nothing the next. And thinking it was a sign. I almost laughed at myself for that. I was 31 years old, 2 weeks away from my wedding, and I was reading omens into a dead cell signal. I put the phone in my purse and got out of the car. The house looked the same as always. Colonial style, white shutters, the kind of front yard where someone clearly put in real effort, hydrangeas along the walkway, a little American flag by the mailbox still up from the 4th. My future mother-in-law, Sandra, had always kept things tidy. I used to think that said something good about her. I'd driven out to Naperville that Saturday afternoon because I'd left my bridesmaid gift list on the kitchen counter the week before. A handwritten page with sizes and preferences for each of my 4 bridesmaids, things I'd been collecting for months. Sandra had called to let me know she'd found it. I could have just asked her to take a photo and text it to me, but she'd already mentioned she was making her famous lemon bars, and honestly, I wanted to get out of the city for a few hours. My apartment felt smaller every day that week. The wedding to-do list had colonized every flat surface. I rang the doorbell. No answer. I tried again. The door wasn't fully latched. It swung open maybe an inch when I knocked the second time. Sandra had mentioned she'd been having trouble with the latch. I pushed it gently and stepped into the foyer. Sandra, it's me. Nothing. But I could hear voices coming from somewhere toward the back of the house. The kitchen, maybe, or the sunroom. I set my keys on the little table by the door, the same place I always put them. I'd been coming to this house for 3 years. I knew where the good mugs were, which drawer had the scissors, that the guest bathroom door stuck if you didn't lift the handle when you closed it. I knew this house almost as well as I knew my own apartment. I thought that was a good thing. I started walking toward the voices. The hallway between the foyer and the kitchen has this weird acoustic quality. I'd noticed it before, the way sound travels through it. You can hear a conversation from the sunroom clear as a bell when you're standing halfway down that hall. I'd joked about it to my fiancé, Owen, once. He'd laughed and said his parents had no secrets anyway. I heard Sandra's voice first. She's going to keep paying into the joint account once they're married. Owen told me she makes almost $280,000 a year now. I stopped. $280,000. My salary. The number I had told Owen in confidence, early in our relationship, when we were talking about the future. He was the only person I'd ever told. And the clinic? That voice was Owen's father, Ray. Her name's on it, obviously. But if they're married long enough, how long is long enough? Illinois. 7 years, community property considerations kick in fully. But even before that, if she's putting money into a joint account, into shared investments, Owen needs to be smarter about the timeline. I don't know how long I stood there. The hallway felt like it was tilting. I had my hand flat against the wall, and I remember the texture of the paint under my palm, slightly rough eggshell finish, the kind my mother always said was the practical choice. My mother. She'd had a bad feeling about Owen's family since the engagement dinner. She never said it directly because that's not how she operates. She just got quiet, in that specific way she gets quiet. And when we were alone, she'd said, "He's wonderful, sweetheart. I just want you to make sure you know his people." I'd told her she was being old-fashioned. I'd told her I did know his people. I stood in that hallway, and I thought about my mother saying that, and I felt sick. The clinic she was talking about was my father's. He'd built it from nothing. A small physical therapy practice in Wicker Park, 2 rooms and a borrowed ultrasound machine in 1987. By the time he retired, it had 3 locations and 14 therapists on staff. When he passed 4 years ago, he left it to me and my younger sister, Becca, jointly. Becca wanted to sell immediately. I bought out her share. It meant taking on debt I was still paying off, but I couldn't let it go. The clinic was my father's whole life. Every time I walked in there, I could still smell his coffee in the break room. I had told Owen about the clinic in the way you tell someone you love about the things that matter to you. I told him about my father building it, about buying Becca's share, about the debt. I told him it was the most important thing I owned, not because of what it was worth, but because of what it meant. And now I was standing in the hallway of his parents' house, listening to his mother calculate timelines. I don't know what I expected myself to do. In movies, you walk in, you confront, you say something devastating, and then you leave with your dignity intact and the music swells. But I just stood there. I couldn't make my feet move. Then Sandra said, "Does he actually love her?" A pause, long enough that I counted 4 fourths in my head. Ray said, "Does it matter?" Another pause. Sandra said, "No. No, I suppose not." That was when I took out my phone. My hands were shaking badly enough that I almost dropped it. I opened the voice memo app and pressed record. I pressed it, and then I just held the phone out toward the sunroom. And I stood absolutely still, and I breathed through my mouth so they wouldn't hear me. They talked for another 11 minutes. I know because when I looked at the recording later, the timestamp said 11:23. In those 11 minutes, I learned that Owen had told his parents about the clinic's 3 locations and the rough valuation his accountant had given me 2 years ago. I learned that Sandra had already researched Illinois marital property law. I learned that Ray had suggested Owen move slower on kids because children complicate asset division. I learned that they referred to me between themselves as the situation, as in once the situation is settled, we can relax. The situation, I had a name, I had a face. I had a mother who made 2 sweet iced tea and cried at the ceremony rehearsal. I had a father who spent 30 years building something with his hands so that one day it could mean something to me. I was not a situation. I waited until I heard them stand up, the scrape of chairs on tile, and I backed down the hallway toward the front door, quietly, one step at a time. I picked up my keys from the table. I eased the door shut behind me. I sat in my car for a while, then I drove home. I did not cry on the drive home. I don't fully understand why. I think my brain hadn't processed it as real yet. It was still running on some kind of emergency protocol, keeping everything functional and moving. I drove the 40 minutes back to Lincoln Park with both hands on the wheel, following every traffic law, stopping at yellow lights. I called my sister from the parking garage under my building. "I need you to come over," I said. Becca knew from my voice. She didn't ask questions, she just said, "I'll be there in 20 minutes. She was there in 15. She brought wine and leftover pad thai from her fridge, and she sat on my kitchen floor with me. Not the couch, the floor. I have no idea why we ended up on the floor, and I played her the recording. When it was done, she didn't say anything for a long moment. Then she said, "Okay, what do you need from me?" That's Becca. That's exactly how she is. No drama, no I told you so, just, what do you need? What I needed was to think. So I thought, with Becca beside me and the pad thai getting cold, I want to be honest about something because I think it matters. Owen and I had been together for 3 years. I had loved him, genuinely, in the way you love someone when you've built a whole life alongside them. Inside jokes and shared grocery lists, and knowing which side of the bed is theirs and yours. He was smart and funny and patient, and he was good to me on all the days that counted. I thought I knew him. But the man in that recording, the one his father was coaching on timelines, the one his mother assumed didn't actually love me, I didn't know that man. I didn't know if those 2 men were the same person, or different people who just happened to share a face. And I realized I couldn't marry someone when I wasn't sure the answer to that question. Becca slept on my couch that night. I didn't sleep at all. In the morning, I called my attorney. Her name is Patricia. No, wait, she's not someone I can name in connection with a case. But I'll just say she's someone I'd used when I bought out Becca's share of the clinic. And she answered on the second ring even on a Sunday morning, because that's the kind of attorney she is. I walked her through what I'd heard and played her the recording. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Before you do anything else, I want you to do 3 things. First, don't transfer any money into any joint accounts. Second, don't sign anything. Third, don't have this conversation with Owen over the phone. I had a venue deposit that was non-refundable. I had a dress I'd spent 4 months finding. I had 140 guests with plane tickets and hotel rooms and new shoes. I had a cake tasting scheduled for Tuesday. I had a florist who'd spent 6 weeks designing centerpieces around ivory garden roses and dried pampas grass. None of that felt real anymore. What felt real was the 11-minute recording on my phone, and my father's clinic and the way Ray had said, "Does it matter?" after someone asked if his son actually loved me. I asked Owen to come over that Sunday evening. I told him we needed to talk about the seating chart, which was something we'd been putting off. He said, "Sure, I'll bring dinner." He showed up with Thai food, different restaurant than Becca's, but still, and he kissed me on the cheek and said I looked tired and asked if I was okay. I told him I needed to ask him something and I needed him to be completely honest with me. He said, of course. I asked him what his parents thought of our relationship. Something moved across his face, just for a second. Fast enough that I might have missed it if I hadn't been watching for it. He said they were thrilled. He said his mother loved me. He said his dad thought I was sharp as a tack, which is exactly the kind of thing Ray would say, and hearing it in Owen's voice made my stomach turn. I let him finish. Then I set my phone on the coffee table and pressed play. I watched his face while he listened. I will not describe what I saw there, not because I can't remember, but because some things belong to the private record of your life and not to anyone else. What I will say is that when the recording ended, he didn't say it wasn't real. He didn't say his parents had misspoken or that I'd misunderstood the context. He said, "How long have you had this?" And I said, "Since yesterday." He said, "I didn't know they were going to." And then he stopped. He tried again. I never told them to. Another stop, I said, but you told them my salary. He didn't answer. I said, you told them about the clinic, the valuation, the timeline for when I'd finish paying off Becca's share. He said, I didn't think. I said, I know. We sat in silence for a while. The Thai food was still on the counter, untouched, getting cold. Then he said, what are we going to do? And I said, I think I'm going to cancel the wedding. He didn't fight me on it. I don't know what I expected, anger or grief, or some kind of argument that would make me doubt myself. But he just sat there and nodded slowly. Like somewhere in him he'd been waiting for this, and that told me everything I hadn't been sure about. I won't lie to you. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest of my life. Not because of Owen. That part, once I'd made the decision, had a strange clarity to it, like a room coming into focus after being blurry for a long time. The hard part was everything else. Calling my bridesmaids. My maid of honor, Kelsey, cried on the phone and then immediately said, what can I do? My friend Audra drove from Indianapolis. They sat with me and helped me make the calls, and draft the emails and navigate the particular administrative nightmare of undoing an event that had taken a year to plan. Calling my mom was the hardest call I made. She answered on the first ring, which she always does. I said, Mom, I need to tell you something. And the way she said, okay, sweetheart, quietly, like she was already holding her breath. I knew she already half knew. Mother instinct, maybe, or just 31 years of knowing me. I talked for a long time. She listened. At the end, she said, I'm so glad you found out before. Just that, before. I lost the venue deposit, for $200. The photographer was gracious and returned half. The florist kept her fee for the design work, which was fair. The dress I donated to a nonprofit in Chicago called Brides Across America that provides wedding gowns to military brides and women who otherwise couldn't afford them. I'd paid just under $7,000 for it. Letting it go to someone who would actually wear it felt right in a way I can't fully explain. It felt like turning something that could have been just a loss into something that meant something. Owen and I did not have another real conversation after that Sunday evening. He moved out of the apartment we'd been planning to share. We'd already signed the lease, which was its own separate nightmare, and his name was removed from it. My attorney handled the logistics. I signed nothing without her eyes on it first. His parents never reached out to me directly. Not once. I've thought about that. I think they knew there was nothing to say. There's a thing that happens after you make a hard decision that you know was right. People expect you to seem okay, or they expect you not to seem okay, and they're watching for or the other, and you can feel the watching. What actually happened to me was stranger and quieter than either of those things. I just went back to my life. I went back to the clinic. I went back to my apartment and my routines, and my standing Thursday lunch with my sister and my Saturday morning walks along the lakefront. My father used to say that the lake doesn't care what happened to you this week. It's just there. That always used to annoy me when he said it. It sounded like something you'd read on a refrigerator magnet, but I understood it differently that fall, walking along the water in the cold, watching the skyline do what it always does, which is just stand there and be the skyline. I didn't lose my father's clinic. I didn't lose myself. I almost handed both of those things to people who saw them as line items, and I didn't. I keep the recording. Not because I'm angry. I was angry for a while, and then I wasn't. I keep it because it's proof of something I need to remember, that knowing your own worth isn't something you figure out once and you're done. It's something you have to keep choosing. Every time someone asks you to set it aside just a little, just this once, just because it would be easier, you have to choose again. My mom calls every Sunday morning now. We talk about the clinic, about Becca's kids, about whatever she's been reading. Last Sunday she called, and there was a lot of noise in the background, and I asked where she was, and she said she was at a bridal shower for someone from her church. I asked how the bride seemed. She said, happy, nervous, certain. I said, that's how you're supposed to feel. She laughed. And I laughed too, and I meant it, and that felt like something worth noting. That I could laugh about it, and mean it, standing in my kitchen on a Sunday morning, with the whole day still ahead of me.